On a moonless night in the Solomon Islands, the sea was a black mirror, broken only by the faint ripples of our PT boats slicing through the water. The Japanese destroyer's searchlight cut through the darkness like a blade, narrowly missing our bow as we drifted silently off the coast of WWII. It was July 20th, 1943, and aboard PT-163, 22 American sailors crouched low, hearts pounding, trying to blend into the shadows of our wooden vessel. Behind that destroyer, 3 Japanese transports carried over 500 enemy troops, steaming toward Kolombangara to reinforce their grip on the Solomon Sea. In 3 minutes, we would turn that quiet night into a firestorm. My name is Chief Petty Officer James, Jim, Callahan, United States Navy Reserve, and I was part of a ragtag crew that proved small boats could bring a naval empire to its knees. My hands were clamped around the grips of the twin .50 caliber machine guns, the metal cold against my palms. Beside me, Lieutenant Dan Sullivan, our skipper, listened as Ensign Paul, Doc Harper murmured firing coordinates. The faint green glow of our compass was our only light, a beacon in the suffocating dark. Behind us, PT-166 and PT-169 lurked in the volcanic shadows of WWII, waiting for our signal to strike. We were America's hidden dagger, and the Japanese Navy was about to learn why the night no longer belonged to them. People often ask what it felt like to serve on a PT boat, the Navy's best-kept secret in 1943. The truth? We were too focused on staying alive to think about glory. Our mission was simple but brutal: stop those 500 Japanese soldiers from reaching Kolombangara, where they'd turn the tide against American Marines fighting for a critical airfield. Every torpedo we launched was a lifeline for our boys on the ground. Every enemy ship we sank meant fewer telegrams to grieving families back home. To understand how 3 wooden boats dared to challenge the Imperial Japanese Navy at its peak, you need to know the stakes of the summer of 1943. The Pacific War was a clash of giants, but it was fought in the shadows as much as in the open sea. The Japanese had mastered night warfare, turning darkness into their weapon. Since their crushing victory at Sevo Island in August 1942, where they sank 4 Allied cruisers without losing a single ship, they ruled the night in the Solomons. Their sailors were trained to fight blind, relying on sharp eyes and flawless coordination, no radar needed. They called their nocturnal supply runs the Tokyo Express, slipping troops and supplies past our defenses under cover of darkness. We called it the Rat Run. But the name didn't matter, they moved with impunity. The U.S. Navy had bigger ships, better radar, and more guns, but we were losing the night war. Our cruisers and destroyers, built for open ocean battles like Jutland or Tsushima, were clumsy in the tight, reef-strewn waters of the Solomons. The Japanese outmaneuvered us, striking and vanishing before we could respond. Across the globe, the war's naval battles told a similar story. In the Atlantic, German U-boats hunted Allied convoys with ruthless precision, using wolf-pack tactics to choke Britain's supply lines. The Kriegsmarine submarines were the terror of the seas, sinking merchant ships faster than we could build them. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, Japan's navy was a juggernaut. Their carriers had devastated Pearl Harbor, and their battleships like Yamato were floating fortresses. But both Germany and Japan relied on traditional naval power: big ships, big guns, and disciplined fleets. The Allies needed something new, something unorthodox. For America, that answer came from an unlikely source: a wooden speedboat called the Patrol Torpedo Boat, or PT boat. Born from desperation and American grit, PT boats were unlike anything the Navy had ever built. At 78 feet long and 20 feet wide, they were made of mahogany plywood, not steel. 3 Packard V12 engines, adapted from aircraft designs, gave them speeds exceeding 45 knots, faster than any destroyer or torpedo in the Japanese arsenal. Armed with 4 21-inch Mark 13 torpedoes, a 20mm Oerlikon cannon, and twin .50 caliber machine guns, they could unleash chaos for about 15 minutes before needing to run or risk sinking. These weren't warships in the traditional sense. They were maritime guerrillas, designed to hit hard and disappear. I first laid eyes on PT-163 in March 1943 at the Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron Training Center in Melville, Rhode Island. I'd been a destroyer sailor, escorting convoys through U-boat-infested waters in the Atlantic, when the Navy called for volunteers for experimental vessels, with a projected casualty rate of over 50%. Out of 250 men, they picked 38. I got in because I could navigate by the stars and had handled small boats on Lake Michigan as a kid. When I stepped aboard PT-163, I thought the Navy had gone crazy. This was no warship. It was a racing yacht with guns bolted on. The wooden hull creaked under my feet. The crew quarters were so tight we had to share bunks. There was no armor, just thin metal shielding around the bridge. One hit from a Japanese 5-inch gun, and we'd be splinters. But then I met Lieutenant Sullivan, and everything clicked. Dan Sullivan was 29, a grizzled veteran by PT boat standards. He'd survived the Pearl Harbor attack aboard the destroyer USS Ward and fought at the Coral Sea. "I'm done being a sitting duck," he told us. "These boats let us hunt." Sullivan saw what most didn't. PT boats weren't meant to slug it out like battleships. We were assassins, striking from ambush and vanishing into the night. Our crew was a motley bunch, farmers, mechanics, even a former math teacher, who never have served together on a destroyer. Ensign Paul, Doc, Harper, our executive officer, was a Chicago schoolteacher who could calculate torpedo trajectories faster than a slide rule. Chief Machinist's mate Tony Russo, a Brooklyn gearhead, kept our finicky engines running like race cars. Radioman Eddie Sparks Malone, a former submariner, could work a radio in dead silence. Torpedo Man Mike, Irish, Kelly treated our Mark 13s like prized possessions, polishing their propellers and whispering to them like they were living things. "These babies," he'd say, "are what make the Japs respect us." Our 13-man crew was a cross-section of America, Irish, Italian, black, white, city kids and country boys, all volunteers who knew the odds were stacked against us. Training in Melville was relentless. We learned to fire torpedoes at 40 knots, navigate through blinding storms, and think like raiders, not sailors. Our instructor, Commander John Blackjack Ramsey, a survivor of the Guadalcanal campaign, had one rule. "The Japanese play by the book. You don't. Make them fear the dark." He taught us that our greatest weapons were speed, surprise, and sheer nerve. We arrived at our forward base on Rendova Island on July 1, 1943, as the invasion of New Georgia kicked off. The base was a muddy outpost with a fuel depot, a few tents, and a dock hidden under palm fronds. The air smelled of diesel and jungle rot, and the distant boom of artillery reminded us why we were there. Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 7 had 10 boats tasked with stopping Japanese reinforcements from reaching enemy strongholds. It sounded straightforward: patrol the Solomons, sink anything flying the rising sun. But the reality was a nightmare. The waters were a labyrinth of reefs and islands, crawling with Japanese seaplanes, coast watchers, and destroyers trained to hunt us. Our first patrol on July 6 was a wake-up call. 4 PT boats, including ours, tried to ambush a Japanese convoy near Choiseul. A seaplane spotted us first, and suddenly, 3 destroyers were chasing us, their searchlights pinning us like bugs. Shells rained down, turning the sea into a cauldron of spray. PT-159 took a 5-inch round and vanished in a fireball, 13 men gone in seconds. We escaped by threading through coral reefs at breakneck speed, but we fired no torpedoes and sank nothing. Back at Rendova, Sullivan gathered us. "We're not destroyers," he said. "We don't trade punches. We strike from the shadows or we die." Over the next 2 weeks, we refined our tactics. We learned to use island shadows to hide from radar, ran on one engine to muffle our noise, and coordinated attacks with coded flashlight signals. Australian coast watchers and Solomon Islanders risked their lives to feed us intelligence, paddling out in canoes or radioing from hidden outposts. Decrypted Japanese messages from Pearl Harbor gave us convoy schedules, but most nights, we hunted by gut and experience. In July 1943, PT boats were still a secret, called small craft, in official reports. The Japanese thought we were submarines or floating mines, anything but wooden speedboats. That was our edge. On July 19th, a coast watcher reported a major Japanese convoy heading through Blackett Strait to Kolombangara, 3 transports with 2 destroyer escorts, carrying elite troops from the Japanese 8th Regiment. These were battle-hardened soldiers, veterans of Manchuria, who'd shred our Marines if they reached their destination. Sullivan volunteered PT-163 to lead the attack, joined by PT-166 under Lieutenant Tom Hawk Brennan and PT-169 under Lieutenant Junior Grade Frank Lucky Moretti. Squadron Commander Robert Iron Kane was blunt. "Those transports don't reach Kolombangara. Sink them or die trying." As the sun sank on July 19th, painting the sky crimson, we prepped for battle. Irish Kelly checked our torpedoes, setting them for a 12-foot depth and 30 knots, perfect for transports. Tony Russo tuned our engines to purr quietly with mufflers. Doc Harper plotted our approach, factoring in tides and moonlight. I loaded my .50 calibers with armor-piercing incendiary rounds, designed to punch through steel and start fires. Every 5th round was a tracer, turning my gunfire into streaks of light. At 20:30 hours, we slipped out of Rendova, 3 boats in a silent column, engines barely rumbling. The sea was choppy, a 2-foot swell that would make torpedo shots tricky but hide our wakes. By 23:30, we reached our ambush point off Vella La Vella's northern shore. Sullivan cut engines to idle, and we drifted, the only sounds the lapping waves and distant artillery. At 23:55, Sparks Malone caught a coastwatcher's signal. 3 transports, 2 destroyers, bearing 275, speed 20 knots, 12 miles out. The game was on. Sullivan started 2 engines at low throttle, and we crept toward the intercept point. At 0015 on July 20th, Doc spotted them, dark silhouettes against the stars, right on course. 2 destroyers led, followed by 3 transports, with a 3rd destroyer trailing. They ran dark, but their size betrayed them. Sullivan's plan was bold and borderline suicidal. PT-166 would hit from port, PT-169 from starboard, and we charged straight through the middle, between the lead destroyers, to hit the biggest transport. We'd be surrounded by steel warships, but the chaos would give us clean shots. At 800 yards, Sullivan whispered, "All ahead full." Our engines roared, and we surged to 42 knots, the bow lifting as we raced into the fray. The Japanese didn't see us coming. Their lookouts, trained for submarines or slow destroyers, couldn't fathom boats this fast. We were inside their formation before they reacted. I unleashed a burst from my .50 calibers, tracers slashing across the lead destroyer's bridge, shattering glass and sparking off steel. Irish fired our first 2 torpedoes at 500 yards, the Mark 13s leaping into the water with glowing wakes. The lead transport, a converted freighter packed with 800 troops, loomed ahead. The destroyer to our starboard swung its searchlight, blinding us. Their 25mm guns opened up, green tracers streaking past, shells splashing so close I tasted salt water. Then our torpedoes hit. The first struck the transport's bow, erupting in a geyser of flame. The second hit amidships, splitting the ship like a cracked egg. The 9,000-ton vessel buckled, sinking fast, screams echoing as soldiers spilled into the sea. PT-166 struck next, their torpedoes slamming into the second transport, loaded with fuel and munitions. The explosion was apocalyptic, a fireball lighting up the strait like daylight. Debris rained down, singeing our deck. The Japanese destroyers were waking up, but we were too close for their big guns to aim low, and our position among their transports made them hesitate. The lead destroyer tried to ram us, its bow slicing through the water like a guillotine. Sullivan yanked the wheel, our boat pivoting just in time, missing collision by inches. I raked their deck with gunfire as we passed, seeing crewmen dive for cover. PT-169 wasn't as lucky. Caught in a searchlight, they took a barrage of 25mm fire. Shrapnel tore through their hull, and one engine caught fire. Lucky Moretti broke off, limping into the dark. We swung for another pass, but the element of surprise was gone. Searchlights swept the water, and the sea boiled with shellfire. Sullivan shouted, "Fire the rest and run!" Irish launched our last 2 torpedoes at the third transport, but their captain turned hard, dodging both. We fled at full throttle, weaving through geysers of water as 5-inch shells exploded around us. We regrouped 6 miles south, battered but alive. PT-166 had sunk the second transport, its explosions still lighting the horizon. PT-169 was leaking badly, and we transferred their wounded while plugging holes with anything we could find. Our boat had shrapnel scars and a jammed gun, but we'd survived. 2 transports were gone, taking over 5,000 Japanese troops with them. The third turned back to rebel, its mission aborted. We'd done it, disrupted a major reinforcement, and shaken the Japanese Navy. The return to Rendova took 12 hours, dodging Japanese seaplanes by hiding under island overhangs. At the debrief, intelligence officers grilled us on every detail, from enemy gun ranges to reaction times. Our report would shape PT boat tactics across the Pacific. More importantly, Japanese radio chatter revealed panic about American Devil boats that struck from nowhere. For the first time, the Imperial Navy feared the night. The broader war context amplified our impact. In 1943, Germany's U-boats were still a menace in the Atlantic, sinking Allied ships with impunity. Japan's navy, meanwhile, relied on its night-fighting prowess to sustain its island empire. But PT boats changed the game in the Pacific. Our attacks forced Japan to overhaul their convoy system, adding more escorts and reducing runs, starving their garrisons. The psychological blow was even bigger. Japanese soldiers, waiting for supplies that never came, began to doubt their commanders. The myth of their night supremacy, built on years of training, crumbled against our plywood boats. Our squadron's success sparked a PT boat boom. New bases sprouted across the Pacific, and improved boats with radar and better torpedoes rolled out. Our tactics became Navy doctrine, taught from San Diego to Sydney. But the cost was steep. By September 1943, our squadron lost 5 boats and 62 men. PT-165 hit a reef and sank with all hands. PT-170 was strafed by Japanese planes, only 2 survivors. Yet we'd sunk over 30 enemy vessels, from destroyers to supplied barges, and stopped thousands of troops from reaching battlefields. I returned to the Pacific in 1944 as executive officer on PT-320 in the Philippines. The boats were tougher, radar-equipped, with light armor, but the mission was the same: hit and run. The Japanese tried to counter us with fast destroyers and even kamikaze boats, but they couldn't stop us. We'd become their boogeyman, a shadow they couldn't shake. Sullivan earned a Navy Cross and retired as a captain after Korea. Doc Harper became a college professor, using his navigation skills to teach astronomy. Tony Russo opened a speed shop in New York, boasting he'd made PT boats fly. Irish Kelly stayed in the Navy, perfecting torpedo designs. Their stories, like ours, were overshadowed by bigger battles, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, but we knew we'd changed history. PT boats were America's answer to German and Japanese naval dominance. While U-boats prowled the Atlantic and Japan's battleships ruled the Pacific, our wooden boats proved that innovation and courage could shift the tide. We took a crazy idea, speedboats against warships, and made it work. Today's fast attack craft, from missile boats to sealed delivery vehicles, carry our legacy. The Japanese called us mosquito boats, a term that spread fear through their fleet. Post-war accounts from Japanese admirals, like Rear Admiral Hara Tomichi, admitted PT boats forced them to rethink their entire strategy. They prepared for carriers and battleships, not plywood raiders. For American audiences, the PT boat story is a testament to what makes us great: taking risks, defying odds, and outsmarting stronger foes. We were kids, mechanics, teachers, fishermen, who became warriors. We didn't just fight the Japanese Navy, we rewrote the rules of naval warfare. That night off Vella La Vella, we struck from the dark and vanished, leaving the enemy stunned. We were America's secret weapon, and we proved that freedom, ingenuity, and guts could topple any empire, one torpedo at a time.